Hello and welcome to Abe's complete Star Trek commentary, where I discuss I'm currently going through all the Star Trek episodes from the original series as well as all the other series over time. Today I'll be discussing the 14th episode of the original series, entitled "The Conscience of the King." The Netflix summary, which I do find to be a little inaccurate, but I'll kind of say that for, as the episode goes on, is that Kodos, a fugitive mass murderer, is a 23rd century Shakespearean actor. When a friend is murdered, Kirk asks a Shakespearean troupe to investigate. So that's not really an accurate kind of summary. It could have been worded better, but as I said, I will kind of discuss that as we kind of go through the episodes. I just want to say, thank you to those who have been listening to these podcast episodes so far. I do apologize that there's been a bit of a bit of a delay between the last one and this one, but I am looking forward to kind of going through this episode because I myself do like Shakespeare, and it has always been it's something which I have enjoyed. I won't say passion, it's a bit of a strong word, but but it is so much I do enjoy, and I love it when when that does actually make an appearance on these Star Trek episodes. And so let's get started with the episode and see what what the conscience of the king is, and who Kodos, his mass murderer, is, and let's get this episode started. So the episode starts, pretty dramatically in a few senses of the phrase, being that we see someone being murdered, and it turns out to be part of a stage play which Kirk is watching with a friend. And it's a stage play of Macbeth. I find, given that Macbeth in and of itself is a pretty dark play, I'm finding the music which they've got kind of going here to be a very interesting choice. It's very cheerful, very upbeat, which doesn't seem appropriate for that. Also, given that while this play is going on, Kirk's friend is telling him to kind of watch Macbeth, and he actually he makes a comment that the way he moves, the way his voice, that's him, that's Kodos, the executioner. So obviously he's this kind of really bad guy that that Kirk's friend is very familiar with, and so for these two kind of dark kind of themes, so we've got this really kind of evil person on stage, and this really evil act kind of happening. Now this upbeat kind of almost circus type music, I guess. In some respects going, it seems a very odd and not really appropriate choice, but that's pretty much where the and then we get the opening title aside for the episode. So as we resume the episode, we find Kirk at the home of Dr. Thomas Layton. The Enterprise was initially diverted there because he had supposedly found a new food source or a new food production method of something that would deal with a famine type condition or situation happening on a nearby planet. But it turns out that it was a lie, so that they could try and capture this Kodos, the executioner. Kirk, throughout the exchange, Kirk is adamant that Kodos has been killed or is dead. But Tom is saying that no. Is anyone? How can anyone be sure it was the only evidence that we've got is a body that was burned beyond recognition, which, given the technology that that we have today, to be able to identify burnt bodies, through DNA, through dental records, and a few other means as well. I'm finding it odd that such tests were unable, apparently or allegedly, and this is my assumption at this point, were unable to be kind of conducted on that body to verify the identity of who had been killed. But everyone is assuming that that was Kodos who was killed, and Kirk is very adamant that that he's dead. Tom is making does make a fair point, though, that there are only 8 or 9 of us who have actually seen and Kodos and lived to tell the tale. But we also see, and part of the reason why Tom apparently has those memories, partially because trying to remember. Apparently, he killed 4,000 people. We don't know the full circumstances of that yet, but the death of 4,000 people would definitely stick with you. I agree, but also being injured yourself, because for the first half of the scene, we're only on. Tom keeps his face in profile, so we only see the right side of his face. But it's not after he mentions that Kodos has done something to him as well, that we see that the left side of the face has been scarred, injured, whatever, so that it's covered by a black mask. And it was left eye, left ear, cheek, kind of that area of his face. And so if it was Kodos that actually did that, I can certainly understand that, those memories being, regardless of how long it's been, I can certainly understand those memories, being still being fresh, being very vivid, because you wouldn't. Realistically, to those kinds of memories, there's generally only 2 kinds of responses. There's either it is incredibly clear, or the mind blocks it out, depending on your psychological strength to withstand those kinds of horrific memories. And I would say that with Tom, he's on the incredibly clear side of things. But regardless of that, Kirk is still saying, no, he's dead. The authorities closed the book on that. I'm satisfied he's dead. And he's also not happy with Tom Layton diverting the Enterprise for these false reasons, because it's not good, to divert a starship on false pretenses. They are, they have got other things they need to be doing. Tom has stated that they'll be having a cocktail party with the entire Shakespearean company there with them at the house, which so they can try and trap Kodos again, somehow, assuming that's who this is, to try and get him to confess or something, to reveal himself as to who he is, so he can understandably be brought to justice, because the death of 4,000 people, regardless of circumstances, is something that that I definitely agree should not go unpunished. So Kirk is beamed up to the Enterprise and is now in one of the briefing rooms, and he's doing his own kind of record search investigation between Anton Caridian, the actor who was playing Macbeth, and Governor Kodos of Tarsus 4, also known as Kodos the Executioner. And we find, during there's a few useful pieces of information there. I was right that there was no positive identification of the burned body. Just as a brief kind of tech side note, I find it interesting that whenever the Enterprise library computer is used, it's always got those kind of old style kind of noises happening in the background. To indicate it's thinking, it's working, processing when, and I do understand, that was the technology of the 60s. I mean, that, they had, like, library, it was like record tapes, and whatnot, that computers were still big and bulky then. But even so, one would have thought, at the very least, that by the time the 23rd century came around, that computers in and of itself, as far as when they're thinking and processing and whatnot, that they would have been silent. But still, this is another point of amusement. But anyways, Kirk is going through this record search. There's no identification records on Anton Corellian, and any information on him starts 20 years ago, even though he is an old man. Kirk puts both photos side by side on a screen, and they do share similar facial features, so I suppose it's possible that Corellian is Kodos, but it's purely circumstantial, if anything, at this point. I'm finding the nature of the crime that he committed was that he murdered 50% of a population, and I wonder when. Now this is. I'm hoping someone will kind of at least send me an email on this one, because I'm not quite sure of the details. So feel free to pass the feedback, pass this info along to me. But I wonder if it was around this time that the Thanos timeline for the MCU, for the Marvel universe, was originally coming out in comic books. Because, and I will kind of jump ahead a little in the episode here, because this is one that I am familiar with, but I'll talk about a little bit more. Was Kodos essentially the Thanos of the Star Trek world? Or at least for this one particular planet. I'll discuss why I think that a little bit later on when we get to find out why Kodos actually murdered half the population. But it wouldn't have surprised me if his thinking was somewhere along the lines of Thanos from the current MCU. So, let's just keep watching and see what happens next. So Spock comes into the briefing room at that point. Just for a short scene, just to verify that Dr. Layton is not one for flights of fancy, that he's always been of impeachable character and a brilliant mind. We then cut down to the planet where into Tom's house where the party's going on. Tom isn't there; he's his wife or partner. It says that he's on his way back from running some errands in town. Something which I find odd, because he was the one who orchestrated this party, and yet he wasn't there for for it to happen, which I find interesting. Usually the host is there right from minute one. But after that, in walks Lenore Corellian, Anton's daughter, and aka Kodos' daughter. And being the beautiful woman that she is, Kirk does, the good old Kirk thing and starts, kind of hitting on her in his Kirk-like way. And they strike up a bit of a conversation where it's found out that Anton wasn't going to be attending, that he never attends parties and never provides personal appearances, which both I and Kirk do find interesting, because for a actor to not pander to the to the desires of the fans is odd, to say the least. But I suppose some mystery does add to the mystique, add to the appeal. But given what has been allegedly revealed about him, it's also not too surprising either, because he may be wanting to try and keep his identity, or his previous identity, a secret for some very justified reasons. Let's keep going and see what else happens with this conversation or this episode. So, Kirk manages to get Lenore to agree to go for a walk, and they. As they are walking and talking a little bit, she realizes, or makes a comment, that Kirk is actually kind of a sensitive man when he's out of the company of others. And
just as he's about to go in for what I'm going to nickname from here in the Kirk kiss, he spots his friend Tom, who has been killed. And so let's just find out how and what happened there. So Kirk takes the body of his friend Tom Layton back to his wife at the house, and she's understandably distressed. And Kirk essentially makes arrangements with the Shakespearean Company's original transport, the Astral Queen, to for them not to be picked up by them, but for the Enterprise to track them. To kind of take them, to their next port in Benicia. I understand why Kirk is doing this, because he no doubt has his suspicions in terms of how Tom was killed. That it may have been one of the Shakespearean Company, possibly Anton Caridian, aka Kodos, the executioner, possibly covering his tracks, but suspicions only, no proof at this point, so it makes sense to want to keep an eye on them so that he can do his own investigation. But let's see how that investigation progresses and how things proceed. So Kirk's manipulation of the situation goes exactly as planned. Lenore Caridian beams up to the ship and essentially says that we've been stranded and we'll need a lift to our next destination. If we don't get it, we won't be able to meet this performance or any other performances that we've got scheduled. To which Kirk agrees on the condition that they perform put on a performance for his crew as well. Spock was unaware of what's going on and is a little puzzled at it all, because where they're going is quite a distance outside where they were going to be headed. So he doesn't quite understand why the captain's doing what he's doing, but from an external kind of audience perspective, you can tell that he's trying to manipulate the situation so he can gather more intel and continue to do its investigation in relation to Tom Layton's death. So after finding out that the time that's going to take for them to get to Benicia, still got a few days ahead of them or something. I mean, there's no specific time frame given, but brief side note, I always find it interesting when they say that they're going to arrive at a particular place at that place's local time, because Spock does say that we'll arrive approximately 1500 Benicia time, and I'm wondering how the heck, unless Benicia is actually a small city or one particular location on this planet, rather than the whole planet itself, that I could understand. But if it's saying that Benicia is actually the name of the planet, then just like Earth, there would be a number of different time zones. So, anyway, just a brief kind of side note there. Kirk goes to the library computer to try and find out, what the names are of the other survivors who could identify Kodos, because there were a total of 9, and in amongst the list are himself, Tom Layton, who has recently been killed, and Kevin Riley, who we didn't realize was someone else that could also identify Kodos. Now, we would recognize Riley from the earlier episode, The Naked Time. He was the moron in engineering who decided to shut the engines off and nearly caused the Enterprise to crash into an ice planet at Psi 2000. Anyway, somehow, after that incident, he managed to get promoted of sorts out of engineering into communications, and Kirk is now, after finding out that he's one of the survivors, transferring back to engineering. Something which is both puzzling to Spock and, admittedly, to me. Puzzling to Spock because, he just came out of engineering, and so Riley would probably view this as some kind of disciplinary action, but Kirk's just saying, no explanation, just put him back there. The reason why it's puzzling to me is because it has been proven through a few episodes now that of all places on the ship, engineering is one of the most vulnerable. As far as one would think an engineering would be manned, or would be, shall we say, heavily, if not lightly manned. There should at least be people there, most of the time, so that people can't do sneaky things there. But on many an occasion so far, engineering is shown to be, shall we say, unguarded, or say low to nil personnel, which is very, very odd to me. And putting one of only 2 survivors left that we're told about on this list anyway, and at least 2 survivors that are on the ship, who could identify Kodos. One of them is the captain, so he's fine, essentially. But the other one into that kind of a vulnerable position. Are you asking for him to get killed? I mean, really? Seriously, you are begging this guy, saying, whoever killed Tom, I want you to kill this guy too. At least that's the way I'm taking it, because, among other things, Riley, while being, I'd say this would most likely put him back into a red shirt. We haven't quite seen him yet, but it wouldn't half surprise me if we see him in a red shirt next. Because it would not half surprise me if he ends up being the next corpse. Still, let's keep watching and see if that is indeed the case. Spock then we then find Spock down in sickbay talking with McCoy, trying to see if McCoy can address his concerns at all, because he's saying the captain hasn't confided in Spock what's going on, which is odd because they've been serving together for a while now, and Kirk usually confides in Spock, but for some reason Kirk is playing his cards very close to the chest on this one. Something which admittedly I do find puzzling. I mean, I would have thought that he would have at least let his first officer in on what was happening, but McCoy essentially tells him, I understand his suspicions, but Kirk usually has good reasons for doing what he does. We shouldn't really worry about it at this point. Just give Kirk the benefit of the doubt, and we'll see how it plays out. So let's see how it plays out. So next we see Kirk on a date of sorts on the observation deck above the shuttle bay with Lenore, and it's all fairly harmless at first, just some kind of light flirtations. Kirk does try and weasel a little information out of her about her father, Anton Corridian, but she's cagey about it, doesn't actually reveal anything, and ends up distracting him with a kiss. So it's still very odd what's going on here, and Spock is definitely feeling it. We're feeling it as the audience. So let's see how well Kirk's subtle investigation continues to proceed. So Spock now does his own record search between the 4 people involved that he's aware of at this point, being Kirk, Leighton, Corridian, and Riley, and finds out that the event that they all had in common was the, I'll call it Tarsus 4 massacre. And I'll go into detail now, because this is where my Thanos comment comes into it, that I made at the beginning of this podcast. Being that there was a fungus or a plague of some kind that damaged a large portion of the food. There was 8,000 colonists living there, and certainly not enough food to go around. And so Kodos seized power, became governor, and began rationing it out and killing off people who didn't meet his mold of what the typical or kind of surviving person should be, and so he had his own form of eugenics, survival of the fittest, if you will, and that, and he got to the point where he had killed off over 4,000 colonists before relief arrived, and that there was no real confirmed identification of his body. Which is why everyone kind of suspects that he's dead. But Spock also reveals to McCoy that of the 9 survivors who could positively identify Kodos. 7 are dead, which leaves 2 still remaining, being Riley and Kirk. And wherever one of the survivors died, the Caridian company of players was somewhere nearby. So Spock now knows essentially everything that Kirk does at this point. Not that Kirk knows that Spock knows yet. But he's now starting to piece together, the reason why Kirk would have had these people brought aboard. We then cut to Riley in engineering, and sadly he's not wearing a red shirt, so the rule isn't going to apply, but it wouldn't have surprised me if the scene we're about to see ends up being Riley's death. But let's keep watching and see if that is indeed what happens. So I was right. What actually happens is Riley is down in engineering, plate of food, looks like a glass of milk. I find the food on the Enterprise to be very interesting because they're kind of surviving on little coloured squares of something. I'm picturing a multicoloured tofu here, which wouldn't be... surely by the 23rd century they've been able to pick up some more kind of variety of food rather than just coloured cubes. But anyway, he's feeling pretty lonely there, calls to the rec room where Uhura and several other miscellaneous crew members are, and asks Uhura to play him a song. I do have to admit, Nichelle Nichols as Uhura does have a really beautiful voice. So I really do enjoy the episodes where we get to hear her sing. But while she's singing, Riley is distracted and we see someone, we don't see who yet, with a spray bottle of some kind, spray just one squirt of something, which turns out to be a poison of some kind, into Riley's drink. Just as the song finishes, we see Riley gagging and suffocating, obviously having an allergic reaction of some sort, to whatever, he's been poisoned with. Fortunately, he was, in communication with the rec room at the time, so help was able to get to him rather quickly. But whether or not it was quickly enough for him to survive this, assassination attempt, let's watch and find. So, Riley is currently in sickbay, and it's been determined that he has been poisoned. Spock realizes that if Riley dies, there's only one witness left to the Tarsus 4 massacre, being Kirk, and realizes the danger that would place the captain in. So he gets McCoy to go with him to see the captain in his quarters to discuss their concerns. And the conversation here to me is a little odd, because when it's something like this where there's a potential mass murderer on the loose, why wouldn't that be in the realm of official business? Because Kirk is going on about this, saying, I don't want you interfering in my personal business. Why are you looking into the same information I'm looking into and messing around in my personal affairs? But something like this surely would be official. They would be able to to investigate this kind of threat, and the fact that there has been an attempted murder on board a ship, quite likely is something that could easily convert to an actual murder if Riley doesn't survive. And yet Kirk is kind of saying, no, you shouldn't have done that. But regardless, he relents and lets Spock kind of continue and say, I'm convinced that this guy, Anton Caridian, is Kodos. But Kirk isn't quite so sure, and he's saying that in order for me to accuse someone of being that level of a mass murderer, I need to be sure. I need to feel it. I need to have some rock solid concrete evidence. And McCoy is also worried, that in terms of what Kirk will do, whether it's vengeance or justice that he's after, and Kirk admits he's not sure, because given what he no doubt would have seen as a child, because he would have only been a teenager or young, or possibly younger at this point, at the time that he would have seen Kodos, and it would have only been briefly as he was being pushed along in a massacre line or something, maybe pushed on the right side of the fence to survive or whatever. And, Kirk admits that, over 20 years, memories change and people can change their appearances. Caridian is an actor, and so he's used to hiding what he looks like and wearing masks and disguises. So, There's a possibility that maybe he is Kodos, but there's also a reasonable possibility that he's not. But Spock is, certain enough to want to move against him, but Kirk is, insisting that Spock hold off for now. So Spock, McCoy leaves the captain's quarters, and Spock and Kirk continue to talk. And Spock is, still worried about an attempt on Kirk's life, but Kirk is still being defensive about it, saying that, even with these coincidences, that's not, rock solid evidence. In fact, the Korean company of players has been on board the ship and down the planet where both Leighton and Riley have been either killed or attempted to be killed, although Kirk's still not certain that that it was an attempted murder at this point, and Spock is still concerned there's going to be an attack on Kirk's life. Not too long into this conversation, we hear a phaser on overload. And Kirk orders the deck to be evacuated and Spock to leave the room while he continues to search for where it is. Just as it gets almost to the overloading point, he finds it in the red alert light flash, where the red alert siren kind of light goes. And I'm wondering how the hell the attempted murderer managed to get a phaser there without the captain noticing. Because that, surely the captain would know if someone had been in his quarters, unless somehow they managed to circumvent the lock on his door so that they could enter without anyone knowing. And secondly, but it would have to be pretty recent, unless there was some way to set a phaser on overload on a timer of some kind, blow up in an hour or something. But again, and granted, by today's technology, yes, it would be relatively simple, but by the technology that they've demonstrated thus far, that wouldn't necessarily, as far as what the 23rd century would actually have, would not necessarily be possible. So I'm very curious as to how that phaser got to where it was. In the end, though, Kirk manages to throw it down the garbage chute and maybe blows up a trash compactor, but ends up surviving. So Kirk finally has his confrontation with Korean, and there are a few interesting things that that happen here. One is that Kirk does ask him point blank, "Are you Kodos?" And again, he's cagey about it because he, being an actor, I'll be Kodos if you want me to be. But he doesn't, in such a way that, it's, well, I'll be that if you want me to be, but, but I'm not really. Kirk gives him a short speech of sorts, which turns out to be an execution order, which Kodos gave, many years ago when he was ordering the massacre of half the colonists. And Kirk notices that, and this is in order to do a voice print kind of match, and Korean hardly looks at the paper when he's reading it. It's like he's kind of delving into memory to an order which he gave so many times before, and it was one that Kirk remembered for when he was there on Tarsus 4. Additionally, Kirk says, if I was certain, I'm as certain as I need to be that you are you, but I'm not going to kill you. I'd like it, and don't get me wrong, I want you to die for what you've done, but there's still no outright conclusive proof that conclusive enough that Korean is Kodos, but it's all the evidence is very much indicating to that effect. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether I properly explained this earlier or not, but I will now, is that the whole point of what Thanos did, the whole reason why he was gathering the Infinity Stones was to wipe out, essentially do on a universal scale what Kodos did on a planetary one, which is that, to say that the universe's resources were finite. I mean, there's only, and I'm going to under-exaggerate this greatly, but you'll get the point that I'm making. There's only, 10 sandwiches, 10 pieces of wood, 10 bricks, 10 tiles, 10 pieces of iron, and so on. that need to be shared among, say, 20 people, which isn't going to work. In order for for those people for people to survive, 10 of those 20 will need to die, so the other 10 can survive on the 10 sandwiches and build the 10 houses or whatever. I mean, you get the idea. At least that was kind of Thanos' thinking, and it appears to be that that's what Kodos' thinking was as well, just on a smaller scale. Which I do understand the logic, but one thing which is not being factored in is that life grows. Just because as a very simple thing, just because there are 10 cows doesn't mean those 10 cows can't mate, have children, and have 10 more cows. Or fruit, has seeds so more fruit trees can grow. And rain, water gets absorbed through a number of different channels, gets evaporated up into the clouds, taken to other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and drop down as rain, so that water can constantly be recycled. And there's a number of other examples where which prove that those resources are not finite, but that they constantly renew and regenerate themselves in one way or another. And it's something which, I don't know what the proper situation was, but it does. But I wouldn't have made that kind of a call. I would have tried to consolidate what resources were available and see if there was a way to regenerate and renew it, particularly with 23rd century technology, which no doubt was available, given the era that they're living in, rather than trying to massacre half so that the other half can survive. But in the end, Kirk says, if I got what I wanted, you would not be leaving here alive, but for now I'm done. So Kirk and Lenore have another little conversation after Coridian leaves the room, where she says to him that I was a tool initially so that you could try and get to my father, wasn't I? And Kirk says at first yes, but I did start to get attracted to you a little later on, but they both admit that it's too late. She says that she's been cruel to her, and I do have to agree with Kirk's next line. Cruel to Coridian, but I do have to agree with Kirk's next line after that accusation, that if he is Kodos, the executioner, that he's been shown more mercy than he deserves, and if he's not Kodos, then we'll let you go with no harm done. She does make a valid return to that who are you to say what harm was done, because there's certainly been emotional damage which has been inflicted at the very least, if not physical. But again, given who Coridian is being accused of, and what's happened on board and around them since, it's justifiable. Unfortunate, I agree, but justifiable. So we then see McCoy in his office making just another log entry. Riley is being restricted to sickbay to prevent him from seeing the Coridians, and potentially seeing the face of the man who murdered Riley's family. So that explains why he was on Tarsus 4. He was there, at the time of the massacre, and his family was unfortunately, among the victims. So he was unaware of this at this point, and it was only because Riley overheard McCoy's log entry. Seriously, wouldn't you look behind you or something, try and do that in a secure location rather than where, the focus, target, I suppose, of a log entry could be within earshot? Wouldn't you want to, kind of record that kind of thing privately so it couldn't be overheard? Because that then opens up a number of doors which could be potentially very dangerous, both for Riley and for the Coridians. That one I will classify as a plot hole, because quite frankly I would think that McCoy would have a bit more sense than that. So the last little bit before I do some of the final few minutes of the episode is that McCoy, the performance or kind of play starts, and as it does, Kirk is looking at the voice match with Spock, and it's not an exact match. It's still not enough for Kirk, which is still very surprising to me. There was a movie that I watched once, and I do like kind of referencing other things, so that will happen a bit here. can't quite remember which one it was, not off the top of my head, but the basic thing was that, no, it was an episode, I remember what it was. It was an episode of The West Wing. And in this particular part, there had been a terrorist attack, or an attempted terrorist attack on the Golden Gate Bridge. And they were trying to source out where the attack came from. And they had this mountain of circumstantial evidence pointing to this one particular person, but which President Bartlett was saying it's not enough. Despite the fact that you've got bank transfers and communications, meetings, and all these other bits and pieces of circumstantial evidence pointing to this guy, it's still not enough for me to arrest him. And everyone in the room is shocked that's what Bartlett's reaction was, to all that. And I'm having a very similar kind of reaction here to Kirk. I mean, granted, calling someone Kodos, I agree with wanting to make sure, but surely there's enough circumstantial evidence to the point where you can say, look, it's got to be him. 99% has surely got to be enough instead of 100. But anyway, after that, the Corelli and Anton players start their performance of Hamlet. And while that's going on, McCoy realizes that Riley has left sickbay, and he reports that to the captain. He says, look, doesn't actually say this, but personally I think he should have. I was an idiot. I was recording my log about Kodos and Corellian, and Riley must have overheard me. And Kirk, a few seconds after that, finds out that a phaser has been stolen from the armory, and goes after Riley. And Kirk goes after Riley, who's heading towards the theatre to take out Corellian, who aka Kodos the Executioner. I'll watch the last few minutes, and I'll do a sum up of how the episode ends and my last few comments. So for the last few scenes of the episode, we find out that actually, and Kirk overhears this conversation taking place after the end of the first act. Lenore and Corellian leave the stage, and Lenore essentially confesses to her father what she's done, that she has silenced the 7 people who could have brought harm to her father and revealed her father's secret that he was actually Kodos the Executioner. Kirk overhears this and says, you've both got to come with me now, and he's got a guard with him. The security officer Lenore takes the security officer's phaser and threatens to kill the captain, but in front of everyone on stage. But her father, Kodos, as he'll be known for the last few minutes of this podcast that I'm doing, steps in front of the blast, and she ends up killing her father, which devastates her, understandably, considering all she'd done. This was something which he really didn't want her to do, because he acknowledges the blood on his hands, but never wanted that blood to stain her, but she was willing to do anything to protect her father, which I can understand to a point, but again, I do very much draw the line at murder. But as the episode ends, she gets arrested and taken away, and ends up getting a mind wipe of everything that she's done. Of all things, I mean, come on. Given the fact that she is responsible for 8 murders now, including her father, I would think that that she should, as far as punishment, life in prison, possibly execution herself. But yeah, apparently she manages to get away with it with just a simple mind wipe, which I find ridiculous. But still, overall, a very kind of interesting episode. One which I did enjoy watching. Again, I like as mentioned at the beginning, I do like whenever Shakespeare makes an appearance, which it does in quite a few Star Trek episodes. And it was true that the play was a thing wherein we caught the conscience of this king.